Hello, 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 and welcome to the Foreclosure Deals Coach podcast. This is the show where we discuss how to find, figure, fund, fix, and flip a foreclosure deal. I love having guests on the show. Try to have a guest on each and every single week. And I am super honored to have our team agent, Steve Prewitt, on the show with us today. Obviously, a lot going on in the commission structure of what's happening with agents. Steve is an insider, an agent for very many years, has a lot of great insight on that. Before we jump into that, though, just real quickly, super proud to announce, I put it on Facebook, but I'm going to tell you guys here a little bit. I passed my Series 65 exam. And I got to be frank with you. I've done a lot of standardized testing from my appraisal license, my real estate license, insurance, mortgages. The list goes on and on. Nothing has been quite the mind-numbing experience of the Series 65 test. There's going to be a whole show on that. We'll get to that later on. But for right now, without further ado, I would love to have the amazing Steve Prewitt on the show with me. What's going on, Steve? How's life?
Life's great. How are you?
Living the dream, literally and figuratively. My brain is a little bit fried from that Series 65 thing. You do a lot of standardized testing, so I know you can relate to this. But afterwards, do you have a brain decompress period that you have to go through to start thinking normally again? Because I'm losing my stuff right now.
Yeah, I feel like with any of the standardized testing for any of the financial or real estate licenses and everything, it's definitely, it's a lot to cram in all in once. And,
yes.
Definitely different thought process, just getting through those exams and everything. But good to get those, past you and continue to add to that education always. So.
Absolutely, man. Once it said pass on that screen, I swear my brain downloaded 18 gigabytes of information. I went, don't need that. It's funny how these tests are just enough to test how you think about stuff, not really the data, but how you think about it, how you perceive it. It was an experience. Anyway, let's get to it. The real estate market from an agent perspective is under some pretty major changes right now. I know there's a lot of speculation going on out there, and I don't want to add to the speculation. Obviously, as an agent, how long have you been in the agent business? Just kind of give people some background on you, and they can understand your perspective on this.
So initially got licensed in July of 2005. We've been through a couple different market cycles now, and certainly, seen, a lot of different changes in the industry over the years. I do think some of the things that are playing out now, definitely have potential depending on how different segments of the industry react to these changes, to change up the structure of how, the retail side of the business is done. But I do think it gives a lot of opportunities for agents to, continue to serve the consumer at a higher level, and with a lot more transparency as far as, commission structures and just, what the consumer should expect of an agent. A lot of those uniform, duties and things that the consumer expects for us to do and what the industry has charged for that over the years. I think anytime there's a shakeup in that, and it forces people to level up and continue to look at how they can be more valuable to the consumer that they serve. Yes. That's a good thing for everyone. So
I totally agree with that. And a lot of people, okay, so here's what, let's get the story out there, right? The speculation is that buyer's agent commission is going away. It's no longer going to be part of the situation. Sellers won't have to pay buyers. Obviously, there's a whole retail side of the market that's going to require the buyer's agent. So we know that can't be true. But what changes do you perceive to happen? And can you speak to what the case was, what NAR's position was a little bit, and how the plan is to, how you think the industry is going to respond to it in the short term?
Yeah. So what the lawsuits have been about is that the plaintiffs in the lawsuits allege that by having co-op compensation listed as far as what a seller or listing brokerage was willing to pay a buyer's agent, that by having those commissions listed in the MLS, that was collusion by the industry to, have where every listing pays the same fee or different things. So, that's been misrepresented a lot in the news and media. There's never been a fixed commission structure like any market. I believe that, it's always been something that's negotiable, and that, there kind of got to be a point over time that there was a, standard range of, what commissions were paid that made things competitive in the market. So sellers have always been able to choose whether they wanted to, pay compensation out to a buyer's broker or not. And just in most markets, it's always made sense to do so because the parties that are, going to come in and purchase their home wanted their own representation, and that's really laid out the best for that to happen as part of the transaction, so that it could be financed in as part of the price that the buyer was paying. So a lot of those things just developed, I think, over time with financing guidelines and just how the normal transaction worked that led to where we had that structure for so many years.
Yeah, I mean, agree that there. Lost you for a second. You still there?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. We'd have to make the argument that the consumer believes that there's a commission structure, right? I mean, there's a general consensus that people have expected to pay 3% to the buyer's agent, 3% to the listing agent. That's been the consumer sentiment. I know there's no official ruling on that, but hasn't that been the feeling of the consumer for the better part of the last 20, 25 years? And how does this change the way we feel about how commissions should be structured? I know that's kind of obscure, but if people expect one thing, how do you think it's going to be different moving forward?
I don't know that it necessarily will be. I think that's up to the agent and realtor community to continue to show people, hey, here's the value that we can bring to you in a transaction, and that the consumer ultimately determines what that is worth to them. I think depending on how the finance side of the industry and the appraisal process and everything, any changes that are made there will differ as far as buyers' capability to pay an agent, whether they have to do that out of pocket or whether it can still be included into their financing. That's really, to me, where that developed over the years of being paid as part of the purchase price, is because that's where the buyer could have that opportunity to have their own representation and be able to pay for it as part of the the loan that they were getting, rather than that increasing the cost of acquiring a property. So some of those things, if the finance side of the industry doesn't adapt and make some changes to that, really in a lot of ways aren't in the consumer's best interest, because they won't have the option to have their own representation if they don't have the funds to pay for that representation. And my belief is the whole premise behind these lawsuits was consumer protection and transparency and everything. And so I don't think the goal of that was to take away the buyer's ability to have their own representation. So I'm still optimistic that we'll see changes throughout all different segments of the industry that, while making it more transparent what both the seller and the buyer may be paying an agent that they choose to have represent them, that, they will still be given options to where if they don't have to come up with that additional cash out of pocket to do that, and they're going to be able to, pick and choose what they pay that representation based on the value that representation can bring. So I think, I love that competition factor, and I see it as a huge opportunity for us to continue to look at, how we can best serve and represent the buyers that we get to work with in transactions, and continue to have a reason that they want representation, and that actually is a benefit to them and worth them paying for.
And it reminds me, back when I was in the new build phase, when we had somebody walk into a new build office, it was obviously in the best interest of the builder, because we're not paying the commission, to encourage the buyer you don't need representation. But on the flip side of that, the deals truly went smoother when the buyer felt like they were properly represented. There's less fear involved. It felt like somebody was guiding them, right? And I still think representation on the buy side is going to be super important. To your point, the question is, what is that now worth to the consumer, right? If they're finding the house on their own, if they feel like they're doing negotiating on their own, where's the agent going to be able to charge for their services other than the commission structure? I mean, it's still a commission structure, but how do they justify the commission structure of 3% on the buy side versus what you think it might be in the future? What negotiation? What do you think the range is going to change to? I mean, I know that's speculation, but if you were to guess, Do you think it's going to have a negative impact on total buyer commission or positive?
I think it really depends on, again, what value agents can bring. And it's going to be a matter of having to come to the consumer and show how your local knowledge of the area, how your approach to pricing, how you're going to negotiate, how the vendor networks that you have to get things done throughout a transaction and post closing on a transaction can be of a benefit to them. Really, I think there are more and more options for the consumer to be able to do lots of parts of the process on their own. But those have been there. They've been there on the selling side of things for years, with people being able to sell their home, by owner, and certain scenarios that has made sense for people. In certain scenarios, what an agent can bring to the table has certainly justified and made sellers far more than the fees that they were charged in commissions for that. So
Sure.
I think it has potential to give us a lot of different ways to serve the consumer, whether that be in some fee structures that are just for parts of the transaction that the consumer doesn't want to do themselves, and they're doing more of it on their own. And I still think there's going to be value in somebody paying an agent in a similar manner to what they have now, for that full guidance. And agents really need to be more that role of the advisor now than they've ever been, in
Yes.
terms of guiding somebody not only on areas, on pricing, on financing options, on all of the different components of things and how all of those play together, because those are all things that people can understand parts of. Really, to me, our role has always been the advisor that says, okay, based on all the things that we know and learn about you, here's how we want to put all those pieces together,
Right.
to put them in the best possible position for, whether that's, living in something a year or two, or whether that's making this property part of, a long-term portfolio of something that they're going to own for the next 30 or 40 years.
Right.
And so I think there's a lot of components of that they give opportunity for agents to, meet the consumer and bring a level of knowledge and expertise to put that all together. And I think if agents don't do that, certainly the ones that don't or can't, I do think there'll be downward pressure on what fees they can earn. But in a free market or open market concept, that's the way it should be. You should get paid on the value of what you can bring to the consumer. It's the same way as with attorneys, where one charges $100 an hour and one charges $1,000 an hour. It's really got to go back to the level of expertise and what you can bring to the table for the consumer. So I think that's a positive thing for our industry overall.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you mentioned this is how it's been in the commercial world for a very long time. I think where some of the confusion is coming from is that, commercial buyers tend to be more sophisticated, et cetera. So the concern is leaving the rookie, newbie, first-time home buyer prone to something bad happening to them because they don't have proper representation, while trying to balance that with what that representation is actually worth. Right. And so the market, I guess, is just adjusting that target a little bit. Obviously, people who are just starting out, this is their first real estate journey, they need a lot more help. And they should know that getting proper representation, especially when you're first learning the industry, is of critical importance. And I think there should be a premium for servicing the needs of the first-time home buyer, because there's a lot more stuff that they got to do. On the flip side of that, you got a guy who's bought a couple of houses, et cetera. The fee structure might be different, across that side of it, because he's offering a different level of service to that individual. So the investment advisory world has been that way for years. Commercial world's been that way for years. You brought up legal, one guy's 100, one guy's 1,000. What's the difference? Well, what do they bring to the table? What value can they add? How soon do you think you're going to start seeing changes on the retail market? Because right now, I'm going to temper this question. There's a party going on in investor land a little bit, where the mindset is, ding dong, the witch is dead. We're not paying buyer's agents anymore. We're going to list these things at 0%. That's an unrealistic outcome. I know that to be fact. I do believe, like you said, there could be downward pressure. But how long do you think before we feel the impact of this legislation?
So I think, right now that lawsuit is one that, if approved by the courts, goes into effect where they're asking MLSs to make those changes by July 1st of this year. So I think most of the things I'm hearing across the industry is right now that's kind of a, everybody needs to pause and wait. Everybody's trying to find a solution to, a problem that we don't even know what, the end result of is fully yet. And so I think in the next 6 months, I don't know that we see much change in things. And I think it's something for whether it's investors or any sellers out there to consider, that co-op compensation and whether they offer it or are open to paying it or different things is still always going to be market dependent on what all you're competing against, same as price, same as condition, all of those factors of the net to a seller and the net cost out of a buyer's pocket to acquire things have to find a balance always in any given market. And so I don't think this is going to be something that just completely eliminates that or gets rid of several percent of a purchase price and savings for a seller, because realistically, if the appraisal process is allowed to change and account for that, theoretically, if we look at data from 6 months ago, where most of the time there was commissions or co-ops paid on both sides of a transaction and seller concessions toward rate buy downs or different things like that, and we get 6 months later and those things aren't a part of a transaction, that makes big swings in pricing. And so that's where yes, they may be able to have that mentality of okay, we'll get away with not paying that, but they're also going to have to account for that in terms of what data they're looking at in terms of pricing a home. So there will be a period of time potentially where you get to use some of that data that sold at a little higher price point and save some money there. But I think that will be very much, short-lived. And that, if sellers get to cut certain costs out of things, it'll also impact what buyers are willing to pay for something, because buyers are willing to pay a current price for something based on the structure the way it is and what cash they have to have out of pocket to make that happen. If their costs increase, that is reasonably going to make every buyer willing to pay that much less for any house that they're looking at. So I see a lot of this stuff playing out as kind of 6 in one, half dozen in another. It's not necessarily going to change too much the overall cost structure of this. It's going to change the way that we present it, the way it's explained, the way it's disclosed, and give the consumer a little bit more transparency as to what the representative is doing for them and what they're paying them, and the ability to negotiate on that with that representative within the transaction. So I think a lot of that and the impact on it and how that will change pricing is yet to be seen, depending on the reaction of the finance and appraisal side of the industry and what changes they make to adapt to this.
Obviously you spoke about that in our meeting, what changes we think they're going to make. I mean, the only solution lenders would have at this point would be to finance in the buyer's commission, in which case it's just a seller concession on the other side of the transaction, right? Like you said, it has no effect on the pricing of the home at that point. It's just now added to the financing side, so it won't have much of an impact if the lenders react, which to your point, they kind of have to. Right? Like there's not really that somehow they got to make loans financeable. And by saying people got to bring more money down to pay their representation, that's just an unlikely scenario to take place, especially in the first time home buyer market that doesn't have a ton of money to play with to begin with. Right. So it's like they can't add it to that side of the equation and expect money to keep moving at the rate it is. So they have to respond in some manner to allow it to make that more palatable for the buyer. But I guess, like you said, the question now is timeline. How long does it take for the market to adapt to it? What changes are made? What's approved at federal financing levels, FHA loans, VA loans? Where do they add that different financing? And like you said, time will really tell. What do you think? I mean, I know, again, the investors are thinking, and maybe some agents who don't want to admit it are thinking it's the end of the buyer's agent that we know it. I think we've established that's not the case. But how are programs like the Foreclosure Deals Coach program going to benefit, do you think, from the fact that you're dealing in volume? You've got different pricing structure because you're already working with a set group of investors. I mean, obviously, your pricing is a little bit different for my clients, the teams that come into the foreclosure deal coach system, our clients really, because you're helping with the analysis starting up. You're adding a lot of value, but you're doing it at a higher end volume. Do you think more participation programs like this are going to pop up where people are going to look for that bulk buying in the investment space because they're going to have to really just to compete?
I think possibly. I mean, I think that's one of the powerful things about this is it's going to force agents to look at, okay, how can you be of value and bring bring that representation to clients and make business decisions around, if there's volume with certain groups of individuals or different things like that, being able to do things at different commission or fee structures or different things there. Again, I think a lot of agents are always done that, where they've had the mindset of looking at the opportunities and the relationships there and how they structure that to continue to have things moving forward. Over the years, certainly, when people are buying something and then flipping it and reselling it, or buying something or selling something and buying into something else or different things, I think agents have always had that ability to look at and say, how do they want to structure things to make those things possible for their client. And so, I love changes in our industry, honestly, because it forces people to operate at a higher level. And so I think our industry is, wrought with kind of the perception of that's a lot of people making a lot of money that really don't know what they're doing. And I don't believe that to be the case overall, but there's definitely some of that, within the industry. And so I think changes like this are good in terms of, really making the agent look at how do they serve the consumer at a higher level. And, competition produces great things. It controls costs for the consumer. It makes where they get better representation, where people within the industry have to continue to increase their level of knowledge and expertise. And I see that as an incredibly positive thing for our industry. So
I agree
think there's a lot of good changes that will come out of this, even though I know there's a lot of fear around change within our industry, and the industry that always pushes back on change. But I think that's inevitable in any thing for it to continue to get to its highest and best use, and the consumer ultimately will be willing to pay for the value and insight and expertise that we can bring to the table.
On the flip side of that, do you think more people go with the flat fee listing services? Do you think Zillow's going to make a play in that area? And if I'm an investor, is this the market where you would say try for sale by owner, try to eliminate the buyer side commission? Does that even make sense in this market? What are the potential losses and risks to the investor if they try to go that route?
It's always something I encourage everybody to look at all of their options. I'm, again, somewhat biased probably, but I do believe that the level of, how we look at pricing, the marketing distribution and marketing that we'll put out and different things like that. I truly believe that a well-qualified agent can help somebody maximize what they're going to earn out of something. But I do think there are some very straightforward situations that in coming years, the agent may not get to be a part of and may not need to be a part of. And that, we'll get to be a part of more of the transactions that, need the unique marketing story told or need, unique things done or are far more complex to price and different things like that. So, I think, I think it's always good to have representation and good advice, but the more somebody learns, the more they understand about everything. Certainly they can do it on their own, but it's then a matter of they're looking at their time in highest and best use. That if they've acquired that knowledge, do they want to spend their time that way, or I think that's a lot of where volume of things agents can look at how they can be helpful to investors in terms of allowing them to go do whatever they're doing that's making them the money to put into the investments, and that if we can make that process more efficient, what we're charging to them to help them really isn't a cost because of the ability to increase that volume of what their output is. So, I think that's always something somebody should look at, and there's varying levels of that, and that goes through different life cycles too, as somebody goes from doing one transaction to doing multiple, where you have to have that leverage of different people and a team around you to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, which is the idea behind the whole foreclosure deals coach system, right? Putting a team of people who are all in their highest and best use, as a result, reducing the cost of that service, but still getting the maximum value from it because we're doing enough volume to justify getting the best price for the maximum value. As a one-off retail, it changes the structure a little bit. It doesn't make a ton of sense to offer massive discounts to a guy who's going to buy a house every 3 to 5 years at best. But when you're looking at a guy who could potentially buy 4 or 5 houses a year, it makes sense to look at the fee structure from both the agent side and the investor side and see what makes sense that gets the highest and best use out of the maximum return of the dollar for both sides. So it's like you said, it's going to be an interesting shift, and I think investors are going to benefit from it. I think savvy agents like yourself are going to benefit hugely from it because you're already getting out in front of it and figuring out what clientele you can best serve. But after 20 plus years in the game, you could probably go in any index that you wanted to. Why do you like working with investors as opposed to, I know you still do retail, but what interests you about the investor market?
I've always loved the investment space. I've got a finance degree, and I've always loved numbers behind things. So I like that the investment space is fairly straightforward in terms of what we're able to go in and help with in terms of analysis, recommendations in terms of what to do on the back end of how to remodel the homes. And I really see a lot of the fix and flip stuff as leading into helping investors build long-term wealth as they start to hold some of those things. And, I think fixing and flipping stuff can be an incredible income source. I also think it, can be a great catalyst to owning long-term real estate or eventually commercial real estate and different things that can really serve people well over the next 20, 30, 40 years. And so I see the different parts of investing as being able to offer different advantages depending on whether somebody wants cash flow now or whether they're looking to build equity in things and have that cash flow later in life. And so I've loved in learning that process more with you and a lot of your investors and in some of the management stuff that we've done and different things of really trying to find and meet people where they're at and then take them through a process of how do they build wealth through real estate, because I think it's one of the most powerful vehicles to do that of anything in the world. But it's not a one size fits all. It's not that long-term rentals are the only way or fix and flip are the only way. They all serve a function in that overall picture that I really love the opportunity to interact with different people at different stages of that so that, we can continue to learn more about and learn how to serve people at the highest level to get the best returns, across, no matter how they're wanting to invest.
I love that, Steve. That's a great way to wrap it up. Do you have any parting thoughts? We try to keep these about 30 minutes. We're getting towards the end of this year, but anything you want to just parting thoughts on how this NAR ruling is going to change, how the real estate market is going to change, or how you can best keep serving the needs of the coaching clients who just absolutely adore working with you and have all gotten great results helping get their property moving. But any parting thoughts for the clientele or the people watching today?
I think for everybody, just, I think there's a lot of positive things coming in the industry. And I think both for our investor clients and then for agents, just encourage everybody, keep learning more and more, finding ways to level up your expertise and your understanding in the industry. And I think being well informed goes a long way in terms of, making decisions and operating in any market and finding the most level of success that we can. Like with anything, the real estate, it's a market. There's ups and downs, there's shifts. And I think too often, both on the agent side and investor side, people want things to operate one way and operate that way continuously for the next decade. And that's just not a reality. And so I think, I guess kind of parting thought would be, embrace change, embrace, shifts in things, and that there's a lot of opportunity, no matter what the market's doing, no matter what changes there are, to go out and build an amazing business that, helps create the lifestyle that you want.
I love it, man. That's incredible parting thoughts. I really appreciate it, Steve. Once again, from the bottom of my heart, always been a pleasure working with you. We go back, 20 years together, doing a lot of deals, talking about the market, arguing about valuation. For the record, he's always a conservative side. That's just how he rolls. I try to deal with it, but sometimes, Anyway, I appreciate all of your insight and advice, man. You've really been a blessing to the team. We really appreciate it. Thank you for being on the show.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, you heard it right here. That was Steve Prewitt with the Prewitt Group. He's the team agent here who helps clients to get the best deals on their process to sell the property to maximum value, to analyze the deal in the early stages, to just make sure everything about the flipping process for the clientele goes as planned. If you want to put a rock star like Steve to work for you, you're only one step away. You join up with the coaching program. We introduce you to Steve and the rest of his team and the rest of my team. The combination is a powerhouse team that can help you to find, figure, fund, fix, and flip as many foreclosure deals as you want to get your hands on to build income and wealth through real estate investing. Like I said, it's an incredible time. There's a major shakeup, but there are opportunities. And if you want to get involved, reach out to me, slide up in my DMs, send me a message. Let's set up a time to see if foreclosure investing is the right fit for you. With that, this is Donny Coram, your foreclosure deals coach, thanking you so much for tuning in and reminding you now and always, don't buy a house, buy a deal.